From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. And during our first half hour today, it's all about grain sorghum. K-State's Jane Lingenfelser discusses the just-released results from the 2018 Kansas Sorghum Hybrid Performance Test. She'll identify those hybrids that consistently excelled in each region of Kansas. Following then, K-State's Ignacio Ciampitti and Kathy Gehl with the details on the K-State Sorghum Schools for you producers, set for the first week of February at 3 locations in the state. These will cover a number of issues facing you growers, including risk management, weed control, and nutrient management. And later on this week's horticulture segment, K-State's Charlie Barden will go over guidelines for pruning ornamental trees and shrubs in midwinter, right here on Agriculture Today.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State research and extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
You're tuned in to the Thursday edition of Agriculture Today. As always, we're glad to have you listening in. As the information has been coming in, we've been passing along to you the findings in K-State's row crop performance tests this past year. Those have been slow to emerge because of difficulties in harvest, the weather not cooperating. We have shared with you the corn and soybean performance trial results, and now we can report on the grain sorghum performance trials of 2018 because those plots are all harvested now. Jane Lingenfelser is back by and good enough to share the information with us. Jane is the agronomist in charge of the K-State crop performance tests every year. So again, not unlike the soybeans, it's a relief that you finally have the data in hand, Jane.
That's right. As you say, results are finally complete, and they can be found on our website. That address is agronomy, that's agronomy, .ksu.edu/services/crop-performance-tests, or can be found by searching for grain sorghum results for Kansas. And our annual printed publication will be coming out as an insert in the High Plains Journal magazine. It will be printed along with the 2018 soybean book this year, and it will be in local extension offices soon after that. It can also be ordered by calling the K-State KSRE bookstore. That number is 785-532-1150. An electronic copy will also be available at the KSRE Digital Library. That address is ksre.ksu.edu/bookstore/crops.
An assortment of ways to get a hold of the performance ratings of these hybrids. Recapping this past growing season, an odd one in terms of how things played out.
It was. The 2018 growing season was pockets of pretty good production period sandwiched between cold, wet, and frustrating conditions. The season started out behind when those cold and wet conditions delayed planting in the spring. And the statewide temperatures for April were the coldest since 1895. And while there isn't really much sorghum in the ground at that time, the cold ground temperatures slowed emergence and early growth, even when the ambient temperatures were increasing. And this was followed by the warmest June on record for Kansas, which sped up the vegetative growth to the point that the crop was developing as normal until about the end of October, when the temperatures dropped to below average and we had very saturated soils, and the crop pretty much stalled its development and its dry down.
As far as overall precipitation, though, if you look at the numbers, that was not an issue. It was mostly about distribution of that.
It was. The state was above average from April through October, but it wasn't evenly distributed across the state or across the season. And as I said, there were pockets of near average temperatures and above average ground moisture during pollination and early reproductive growth. And that's really what made the crop this year, because in the fall, the conditions went from good soil moisture to saturated or supersaturated. At the end of October, only 32% of the crop had been harvested. And this was followed by snow and even more rain in November that further delayed dry down and complicated harvest. And we lost the dryland test at Hayes because we were only able to get one rep cut, and the 2 irrigated tests at Hutchinson and Garden City due to the lodging after the Thanksgiving snow. Lodging was an issue, especially in irrigated areas this year, but basically, the issue for 2018 was the precipitation and the complicated harvest.
So plenty of things interfering with the normal course of the tests. And one thing that would fall into the positive category was that the disease pressure was lighter than usual.
That's right. The plus side to all the rain this year, the 2018 sorghum crop was healthier than any in recent memory. There were levels of sooty stripe that were high in some south central fields, but that incidence was lower than in recent years. The rains in the late season caused some issues with head molds, but overall the incidence was pretty low. The most significant disease was Fusarium stalk rot this year. Fusarium is favored by a wet spring, followed by a dry summer and more rain before harvest, which is exactly what occurred for most of Kansas this year, but overall pretty healthy plants.
Although with the caveat, conversely, insect pressure was notable, if not more so.
Yes. Pests, on the other hand, were more of an issue than diseases this year. The hot, dry weather from May to August was conducive to chinch bug development, which they did in very huge numbers. Chinch bug feeding caused considerable lodging in the early season and continued into the soft dough stage, which reduced yields around the state. The chinch bug feeding was followed up by headworms, which are a combination of fall armyworms and corn earworms, which started attacking the heads that were between flowering and soft dough, which further reduced yields if they weren't treated. A hot topic in the state, sugarcane aphids, which were continually migrating into the state from late July through early September, and there were concentrated areas of infestation, but overall there were fewer reports of sorghum impacted by sugarcane aphids this year. This was probably due to the plentiful natural enemies such as parasitic wasps, lady beetles, green lacewings, etc., that kept the sugarcane aphids under control this year.
When it was all said and done, though, the performance of the crop in total actually exceeded the previous year.
It did. Despite all the challenges, the overall state yield was 86 bushels this year. That's up 4 bushels from last year. And production at the state level increased by 27 million bushels. After our long-delayed harvest, more than 50% of the crop still rated as good or excellent for quality. And so I think that really shows the resiliency and hardiness of the grain sorghum crop in Kansas this year.
Now to the performance test results themselves, and you had some dozen or so test sites that were viably available for assessing these hybrids, and you will share in a moment some of those that really stood out at each of these sites, right?
That's right. I'll break down the regions and I'll mention a few hybrids that did well in each region. And this is by no means an exhaustive list because I'll only mention those that did well across the multiple locations within a region. There are hybrids that were higher yielding in the individual locations. And the complete results, again, can be found at agronomy.ksu.edu. And printed copies of the 2018 book will be available as an insert in the High Plains Journal and will be in local extension offices after that. And I'd also like to thank Pioneer and Monsanto for providing our maturity checks again this year.
Well, let's walk through a few of those results from around the state, and starting in the northeast part of Kansas, where your performance tests are dry land systems at 3 locations, you say, Jay?
Yes, we had Manhattan in Riley County, Belleville in Republic County, and Beloit in Mitchell County. The average for the northeast dryland tests was 105 bushels, and hybrids that did well, Alta ADV had an experimental hybrid. The number was XG093. DeKalb DKS 4707 and DKS 4523 did well. And a couple experimentals from Dynagrow, GX17948 and GX17962 did well in the northeast dryland region.
Again, consistently good performers there. Southeast Kansas, dryland once more at 2 sites.
Yes, we had Ottawa in Franklin County and Parsons in Lebec County. The average was 93 bushels. Parsons did not do as well. Ottawa actually was over 100 bushels, which kept up the overall average. And the hybrids that did well in the southeast, DeKalb DKS 4523, DKS 5353, and also our late maturity check, which was DKS 5101, did well. Dynagro GX 17948, M69GB38, and M73GR55, all from Dynagro, did well. And Alta ADV G2275 did well at Parsons. I point that out because that was a tough location this year.
Then to central Kansas, dry land, and two sites right there in the heart of the state. And what were the numbers there?
We had Asaria in Saline County and Hutchinson in Reno County. The average for the central region was 98 bushels. Asaria was pretty drought-ridden. In fact, we lost our corn test there, but our sorghum held in. Hybrids that did well in the central region, DeKalb DKS 3816, Dynagro M60 GB31, and GX 18919 did well at Asaria in particular. We also had several lines submitted by the USDA from Texas in Salina. I mentioned because they are well-suited for Asaria regions coming from Texas. The line that did best, I just have the cross, which is KS 116 by R LBK1, did well in the central dryland region.
Well, Jane, we need to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and round out the listing of those hybrids which stood out in the western part of the state, if you'd stand by. Jane Lingenfelser is our guest, agronomist in charge of K-State's crop performance tests, as we're getting into the results that have just been finished up and compiled on grain sorghum hybrid performance, conducted by Kansas State University in 2018. Jane returns with us after this over the K-State Radio Network.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
We're back now on This Agriculture Today, and Mike Side once more, sharing some of the highlights of the K-State 2018 Grain Sorghum Performance Test Report. Jane Lingenfelser, an agronomist here at the university who oversees those field trials. Jane, we need to continue the lineup of hybrids that did well at the various sites around Kansas by looking at which hybrids were rising to the top in the western part of the state. And you had dryland locations originally at 4 sites, but one had to be dismissed, you say.
That's right. We originally started with Hayes in Ellis County, Colby in Thomas County, Tribune in Greeley County, and Garden City in Finney County. We ultimately abandoned the test at Hayes due to lodging, due to wet conditions. Who would have thought we would have wet conditions in Hayes in November, but we did. Right. The average across the west dryland region was 102 bushels, and hybrids that did well, DeKalb DKS 4523 did well, also Golden Acres 2730B, and our early maturing check, which was DKS 2805, did well in the west dryland region.
And then the irrigated trials, originally with 4 sites as well, but because of adversity, 2 of those had to be dropped, too.
Yes, we ended up dropping Hutchinson and Garden City, again, due to extensive lodging caused by the wet conditions. We were left with Colby in Thomas County and Tribune in Greeley County. I'll mention that there was quite a bit of lodging also at Tribune, and those lodging rates can be found in the book and also on our website. But the average yield for the irrigated region was 129 bushels. And hybrids that did well, Alta ADV XG016 did well, DeKalb DKS 5353, Dynagrow GX 16921, and also Golden Acres 2840B did well in the irrigated region.
Jane, as you pointed out earlier, the hybrids that you have cited here are those that have consistently performed well at these various locations, but that's not the entire story. There's much more that folks can glean from the performance test report.
That's right. I've only mentioned a very small portion of the information that is available to help with hybrid selection decisions. Our book also contains maturity and SCA resistance, in addition to all the yield information. And I would encourage all sorghum producers to research hybrids of interest and see how they did in the tests that are closest to their own management and growing conditions. Another good resource would be the KSU Sorghum Schools, which will be featured next. But as for the performance test, the results are currently available online. That address again is agronomy.ksu.edu/services/crop performance tests. And printed copies of the 2018 book will be available as an insert in the High Plains Journal and will be in local extension offices after that. And another electronic copy will be available on the KSRE Digital Library, and that address is ksre.ksu.edu/bookstore/crops.
Well, as unusual as this past growing season was for grain sorghum producers and for those conducting the tests, nonetheless, the report yields good information that can be used in hybrid selection for 2019 production. So producers take full advantage of that information. As Jane noted, it can be accessed a number of ways. And once more, hats off to you and your crew for rounding out these tests, Jane, because of the delays in harvest and such. It was not a smooth process whatsoever.
And we have nothing but high hopes for 2019.
Indeed. Thank you for coming over, as always.
Thank you.
Jane Lingenfelser, the agronomist in charge of K-State's crop performance tests. And staying on the sorghum theme, we let you grain sorghum producers know about the series of K-State 2019 Sorghum Schools coming up the first full week of February. These are great opportunities for you producers to sharpen your knowledge on all things grain sorghum production. And joining us once more from the Department of Agronomy at K-State, Crop Production Specialist Ignacio Ciampitti and Extension Program Coordinator Kathy Gehl. Well, Ignacio, there's always something new to learn about concerning this crop.
Yes, we are still a number one state in terms of production, and based on the economic price and the difficult markets in terms of wheat and soybeans and corn, sorghum is always there. And it's an excellent possibility to our farmers in terms of offering some flexibility. If you look at our acres right now, we are still kind of shifting around, but then gaining a little bit, a few acres more on the central western part of the state and dryland situation. So I think that we have a lot of possibility of involving sorghum in the rotation, and that's one of the things that we would like to emphasize this year on the schools is really how we are fitting sorghum into our rotation.
We're going to bring Kathy in to talk about the program itself here in just a second, but is there any one standout thing from this past growing season that you would like to emphasize at the sorghum schools?
Yeah, we have a very similar challenge as we have on soybeans. Then in some of the areas, sorghum for harvesting was very, very challenging. Central Kansas, in some south central farmers that they were dealing with basically poor conditions, harvesting conditions. So in terms of quality, not much compared with soybeans. Soybeans has a different kind of a quality requirement compared with sorghum. But I would say that problems that we have, on sorghum around planting time and then specifically more harvesting time with some of the harvest conditions. But some of the good news is that we are seeing much better improvement in terms of conditions for tolerance to sugar cane. So that was not really a big deal last year. So we hope we can keep that thing out of our state for a while. And I think that we are kind of still pushing the concept of trying to increase profits by increasing the inputs that we're applying to the crop. So that was one of the main efforts that we're planning to emphasize on the schools.
Very good. There are 3 such schools taking place the 5th, 6th, and 7th of February. We'll tell you more about locations in just a second. But Kathy, to the program itself, is it a similar lineup at each of these 3, or do they differ?
Well, the topics are all in the same vein, I suppose. They all have a crop production option. They all have fertility, insects, and weed control. The speakers will tailor each location specific to those growing conditions for those topics. The schools are all half-day schools. They start at 8:30 in the morning with registration, and they adjourn around 1:30. A lunch is provided at each school with sponsorship from Kansas Sorghum. And I think that there'll be great opportunities for the producers in those regions to attend these.
So it will be an emphasis on overall production, fertility management, other input management, pest control, and there will be a market component as well, right?
Yes, each session is going to conclude with a market update from Dan O'Brien here at Kansas State. There will also be a speaker at each location from the Sorghum Checkoff or the Grain Sorghum Commission as well.
Very good. So, Ignacio, there's something for grain sorghum producers to pick up within these programs.
Yeah, I think there will be an excellent opportunities. Again, these schools are being offered with the concept of farmers going to one location and getting all the new update information, what were the challenges from previous growing season, and really looking to the future in terms of what are the things that they need to start thinking about for the next coming season. So I will encourage farmers to plan to attend. They can go online. It will take just a few minutes just to put in their name, select the location, and register. I mean, another option is also to contact all the extension offices. Even if a school is not in your county, I mean, you can contact the extension office in your county, and then they will find a way to make sure that your name is being passing around, I mean, to the right location and to get a registration. We are emphasizing at this point also to make sure that when you are registering, make sure to share any contact information, email or phone number. We have always challenges related to weather conditions. I mean, these are in early February, so clearly,
just in case,
and just in case
postponement, right?
Yeah, just in case, we want to make sure we have information so we can send an email out or text out to everyone to communicate if there is any change on the schools. We have applied for CCA, so we will be offering CCA and commercial pesticide credits. So in all the locations that we have insects and weeds, so we'll have enough topics, I mean, to offer commercial pesticide applicator credits.
Very well. So, Kathy, where will these 3 take place and what dates?
Yes. So on February 5th, we will start out in Garden City. It's a Tuesday. And like I said before, registration begins at 8:30 at all 3 locations. The second school will be the next day on Wednesday, February 6th in Hayes. And then the schools will conclude on the 7th and on Thursday in Salina.
And there is a web address to secure one's registration and that all-important meal count.
That's right. These schools are free to attend. We can't stress that enough, but we do like to have registration for an accurate meal count to make sure that everyone is taken care of. So for each of those schools, if you could register 1 week prior to the date that you were going to attend, that would be very helpful. You can search KSU Sorghum online, or if you want to type this into your web browser, you just type bit.ly/KSU Sorghum.
Or, as Ignacio said, touch base with your local Extension agricultural agent. They can help get you lined up as well. Good luck with these, and thanks to the both of you for coming over.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Ignacio Ciampitti and Kathy Gehl from Research and Extension Agronomy here at K-State, the 2019 K-State Sorghum Schools. Once more, Tuesday, February the 5th in Garden City, Wednesday the 6th of February in Hayes, and Thursday, February the 7th in Salina. Grain sorghum producers, be sure to look into those opportunities. We'll be back with more. You're listening to Agriculture Today.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128 plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local Extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Agriculture Today continues now here on the K-State Radio Network. Eric Atkinson with you as we check on today's agricultural news headlines for you now, courtesy in part of DTN. U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue has announced that many Farm Service Agency offices are open temporarily over the next few days to perform certain limited services for you producers. The USDA has recalled about 2,500 FSA employees to open offices today, tomorrow, and in addition, next Tuesday the 22nd during normal business hours. The office will be closed for the federal Martin Luther King Jr. holiday this coming Monday. In almost half of the FSA locations, staff will be available to assist producers with existing farm loans and to ensure the agency provides 1099 tax documents to borrowers by the Internal Revenue Service's deadline. Here in Kansas, 91 county FSA offices will be open during this 3-day stretch. Now, staff members will be available at certain offices to help producers with specific services, including processing payments made on or before December 31st, continuing expiring financial statements, and opening mail to identify priority items. Additionally, staff may release proceeds from the sale of loan security by signing checks jointly payable to the FSA that are brought to the county office by producers. While staff are available in person during this 3-day window, the USDA says that most available services can be handled over the phone. Additionally, producers who have loan deadlines during the lapse in funding do not need to make payments until the government shutdown ends. Noting several activities still will not take place during this temporary reopening, including taking new enrollments and certifying production information for the Market Facilitation Program payments or allowing producers to obtain new loans. The CEOs of the 3 farm credit banks and the Farm Credit Council have called on Congress and the Trump administration to reopen the government so that producers can get their financial affairs in order before spring planting. These officials made their case in a briefing yesterday, that a day after Kansas City Federal Reserve President Esther George said in a speech that in the Plains area, the farm sector is in a prolonged downturn as a result of declining agricultural prices made worse by retaliatory tariffs on U.S. farm products. Now, George is a member of the Fed Open Market Committee, also saying that it's not urgent to raise interest rates any further. In this briefing on farm credit conditions for reporters, Farm Credit Council CEO Todd Van Hoos said that the 3 days that the Farm Service Agency county offices will be open this week and next will provide a bit of relief, but stressed that this is the heavy renewal season for agricultural lending, saying it's important to get those FSA offices permanently open so that they can get business done. Van Hoos also noted that the new Farm Bill increased the size limits on FSA loans, but that those limits cannot be changed until the USDA conducts the rulemaking process. Kathy Gehl, the CEO of Arbor One Farm Credit out of South Carolina, Mark Jensen, the CEO of Farm Credit Services of America and Frontier Farm Credit of Kansas, and Mark Kinsley, the CEO of Ag Country Farm Credit Services in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and North Dakota, all were backing Van Hoos's statements. The officials noted that agriculture operations cannot be closed like a factory. Farmers and others in agriculture, they say, are also not getting the federal reports on which business activity depends. And want to remind you producers once more about the K-State Soybean Production Schools coming up, and 2 of those took place this week. There are more to come, including next week. These a number of issues covering weed control, crop production practices, nutrient management, soil fertility, insects, disease management, and the market outlook included in each of those programs. Telling you that the next 2 are a week from today and a week from tomorrow. Thursday, the 24th of January in Hugoton. That's a morning session starting at 8:30. Then the 24th in the afternoon at Scott City. That will get going at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. January the 25th, Friday then, there'll be a school in Hoxie. It'll get going at 8:30 in the morning. And then that afternoon in Great Bend starting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And the final one of these will be a week from this Monday, the 28th of January in Beloit. That is a program starting at 9 o'clock and then running until about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Online registration available at K-State Soybean Schools. Simply search for that, or you can contact the host extension office in those locations to find out how to go about reserving your part or your place to attend the upcoming soybean schools that will be taking place in western Kansas primarily over the next week or so. Check into those, producers. And that takes us right into this week's edition of the Kansas Soybean Update. Standing by with that is Greg Akagi. Greg?
Teresa Brandenburg, an Osborne County producer and also serves as first vice president of the Kansas Soybean Association, joins us, and she also is the chair of the Kansas Soybean Expo Committee. Teresa, we've just gotten finished with the Kansas Soybean Expo, and the one for 2019 is in the books.
Yes, I cannot hardly believe that we're saying that, but 2019 Soybean Expo is wrapping up. We had a great day here in Topeka. We were joined by producers from all across the state. We had a fun time just sharing that camaraderie that farmers have. We laughed a little bit. We shared some success stories, and we learned a lot of great information.
This is also not only good as far as awards, but research is also important as well to hear the latest from Kansas State University.
Most people don't possibly know that the soybean checkoff actually funds a lot of soybean research. So you're benefiting from those checkoff dollars because you benefit from all that research. So you can come to something like the Kansas Soybean Expo and hear what those researchers are doing to really push the envelope as far as genetics and weed technologies and those kinds of things. And we were really thankful to hear from those folks.
Especially for that everyday operation and knowing planting season's not that far away.
Yeah, we're coming right up on it, and we're just praying that Mother Nature cooperates this year.
Also a chance to recognize several producers, awards for the value and yield contest.
Yes, we had our yield contest results. We did break 100 bushels again this year. We broke our new record. I believe it was 104 point something bushels this year, so we're really excited to see that envelope just being pushed a little bit. We know that soybean genetics are improving. We know that we as farmers are getting smarter, we're getting savvier every year, and we're really trying to be good stewards of the land and make a living for our families, so it's fun to see that.
Teresa, you also had a great keynote speaker from the Farmer's Almanac.
Bob Farmer from Farmer's Almanac joined us, and we had a great time. Everybody was laughing, and we know that even when things are tough, if you can laugh, that's a great day. So we were happy to have him, and it was a really fun, entertaining speech from Bob Farmer today.
That is Teresa Brandenburg, first vice president of the Kansas Soybean Association, as well as serves as chair of the Kansas Soybean Expo Committee. She joins us on the Kansas Soybean Update. It's brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission.
And that from Greg Akagi. As always, many thanks, Greg. We'll be back after this break with this week's K-State Horticulture segment for you. You're listening to Agriculture Today.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
This is Agriculture Today, and next up for you, this week's K-State Horticulture segment. This is along the line of projects that can be conducted while winter is still firmly in place, and it definitely is here in Kansas currently. Pruning landscape trees and shrubs, and sharing some thoughts on that right here. Charlie Barden. Charlie, you hear frequently on our Tree Tales feature, Extension Forester at K-State. We really need to step back, Charlie, and talk about the purpose of pruning, and there needs to be a purpose behind it, right?
Right. You need to have some objectives in mind as to why you're pruning that tree or that shrub. Especially for shrubs, we try to keep them a certain size so they can enjoy their blossoms when they open. You know, at eye level, we don't like shrubs to get overgrown and too large and woody. Sometimes then they block the view out a window or start to encroach on a nearby sidewalk or infrastructure like that.
Trees, different purpose potentially, right?
Right. Trees, we're not usually trying to control the size of the tree because the tree just keeps growing in height every year, but we may be removing lower branches to allow us access underneath the tree or pruning back some branches that are getting too close to the roof of the house. Could be scraping shingles or blocking the view out the end of your driveway.
All right. Well, let's go back to shrubs, and then we'll bring in thoughts on tree pruning as well. What guidelines does one go by in terms of shaping a shrub and keeping it in a healthy state via pruning?
The easiest way to prune most multi-stem shrubs is to remove a few of the largest, oldest canes each year, the largest, oldest sprouts, the main stems, and they'll sprout up then from the base. That's the easy way to control the overall height of that shrub. If you take kind of a hedge pruning approach and you just try to always trim anything that gets above, say, 5 feet or 6 feet in height, you'll constantly have regrowth at that point, and it gets woody and less blossoms and less vigorous. But if you just find that shoot that is getting too tall, you lop it off of the ground line, then let it resprout from the base, then you can control the height of the shrub and keep it more young and vigorous for growing.
One thing about shrubs, though, one needs to understand their flowering tendencies and not prune the wrong way, to put it that way.
Right. There's two classes of shrubs, spring blooming and summer blooming shrubs. The spring blooming shrubs are the most common ones, like forsythia and lilac and flowering almond. And the ideal time to prune those shrubs is actually a little bit later in the year, just after those shrubs have flowered in the spring, say in late March or April, and then do the pruning at that time. You can do the pruning earlier in the year, but then you'll be throwing away the flower buds that will be opening in a couple of months.
The point is, though, know what your shrub is, and in fact, if it does bear flowers on last year's wood, let that be a guide for your pruning.
Exactly. The other class of shrubs, the summer bloomers like roses, most of the viburnum and spirea, and these bloom during the summer several times during the year. They usually tend to be more prone to winter kills, so I would not want to prune those shrubs like this now in the middle of winter, because then we may get a cold snap and get further dieback. But I would definitely wait to prune those shrubs till it gets nearer into spring, say middle of March, when the worst of winter is over.
Let's move on to trees now. And like you said, the reason there for pruning trees might be to remove a branch that's scratching against the roof of the house or otherwise obstructing something. But we're looking at shaping the crown of that tree as it continues to grow and making sure that that's a balanced crown, right?
Yes, it's good to keep it balanced. The tree usually does a pretty good job about staying in balance, growing equal amount of weight, say, on each side of the tree. And if the tree does get leaning for some reason, it has ways to develop what they call reaction wood and tension wood, which still keeps the tree upright and quite strong.
What guidelines does one need to look at there? And we talk so frequently about having identifying as a tree grows, a single leader to preserve. Talk about that, if you
Right. Especially important for young trees as they're starting to develop their main structure, their main architectural shape. If you can keep that single main leader, that single main stem as long as you can up through the tree is, say, 15 to 20 feet tall, it'll be much stronger as it matures. When we get a double leader, we get two stems growing side by side. They compete with each other. They get what they call included bark in between the two stems, and then during high winds or an ice storm, they'll tend to split apart. So the longer we can select just one main stem to be the leader of the tree will develop a stronger structure.
And you want to identify that as early on in that tree's life as is practical here.
Yes.
Other things that folks should think about concerning selecting branches for pruning?
Sure. The biggest thing is where to remove the branch. Sometimes we mention that example of a branch that's scraping the shingles or, hitting a window on a windy day. People just cut off about a foot of that branch and say, well, that solves the problem. Well, that branch just grows right back into the window in another year or so. Quite often when we have a problematic branch, it's a better idea to cut it back to where it's attached to the main trunk, just outside what's called the branch collar and the branch bark ridge, and that branch won't be a problem anymore. It won't resprout. There won't be a stub left there that'll decay and lead to problems in the main trunk. So it's usually better to remove the branch completely than cut it off halfway.
Part of the success of pruning, be it trees or shrubs, is making that clean cut. And this is where folks often err, right?
Right. Having good sharp tools certainly makes a difference. If it's a large branch, say bigger than a 2 inches in diameter, it's important to do what we call a three-cut method, where you do an undercut first and then move out away from the trunk and do a cut from the top down, and that removes the weight of that branch. Then come back in and clean up the stub and make it a a cut just outside that branch collar.
And for smaller branches, one can simply use sharp loppers and make
Right.
it cut that way?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, if one doesn't follow procedure, you can end up with that stub detrimental to the health of the tree itself, could it not, at some point?
Exactly. Leaving that stub, if it's a species that resprouts, like most of our hardwoods, if that stub gets some sunlight on it, it'll resprout and grow a long sucker sprout to replace itself pretty quickly. If it's a conifer or an older tree or one that's in the shade, that stub won't resprout, but it'll just start to decay. And then that decay will move in the stub and into the main trunk of the tree and cause decay in the main stem, the main trunk.
So make a clean cut. It's
Yes.
that simple.
Mm-hmm. And it will heal over much more quickly.
There is information further on tree and shrub pruning through local extension channels, is there not, in the form of publications and the like?
Yes, we have a number of publications that address the issue. Mm-hmm.
Right, so inquire at your local extension office, or you can go to the horticulture website at K-State and find out more about the guidelines to successfully pruning those landscape ornamentals, trees and shrubs, even during this stretch of the winter, if the weather is conducive enough, that is.
Right.
Charlie, thank you for coming over, sharing these thoughts.
Thank you.
He's Charlie Barden, a forester with K-State Research and Extension, and he's been good enough to join us for this week's K-State Horticulture segment. Well, once again, our time is away. We'll return this same time tomorrow, and hope you will as well. Meantime, a good day to you. Eric Atkinson here. This has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.